I never thought I'd be dealing with petty theft when I started my construction business, but watching someone steal thousands of dollars worth of building materials from my job site on grainy security footage was a new low. My name is Travis Porter, and I run a mid-sized construction company in Scottsdale, Arizona. We handle everything from home renovations to commercial builds, and I'd spent 15 years building up a reputation for quality work and honest business practices. The summer of 2025 started like any other, with multiple projects running simultaneously and my crew working overtime to meet deadlines. I'd just landed a contract to build a custom home in one of those upscale developments where the houses start at $2 million and go up from there. Good money, good clients, everything was falling into place. The job site was in Desert Ridge, a planned community with manicured lawns and houses that all looked like they belonged in an architectural magazine. We'd cleared the lot and started framing when things got weird. At first, it was small stuff. A box of screws here, some lumber there, nothing that screamed theft, more like misplaced inventory. My foreman, Rick, mentioned it during our weekly meeting, but we chalked it up to accounting errors or guys loading materials onto the wrong truck. Then, the real stuff started disappearing. Premium cedar decking, custom windows, a pallet of travertine tile that cost more than my first car. I'd ordered everything specifically for the Desert Ridge project, top shelf materials because the clients wanted the best. When Rick called me on a Tuesday morning to tell me that half our delivery from the previous day had vanished overnight, I knew we had a problem. "Boss, I'm telling you, I locked up myself yesterday," Rick said, frustration evident in his voice. "The materials were there at 6 p.m. when I left. I came in this morning and the cedar's gone, all of it. 2,000 square feet of decking just gone." I drove out to the site immediately, my mind racing through possibilities. Professional thieves, competitors trying to sabotage us. The job site was surrounded by a chain-link fence with a padlocked gate, but that wouldn't stop someone determined. What bothered me most was the selectivity. They weren't taking tools or equipment, just materials. Specific, expensive materials. Standing in the middle of the construction site, I looked around at the neighboring properties. The development was only half built, with empty lots scattered between finished homes. To the east, there was a completed section of the neighborhood, houses already occupied, complete with the mandatory homeowner association that governed everything from mailbox colors to lawn heights. "We need cameras," I told Rick. "Good ones. I want every angle covered." Within 2 days, I had a security system installed that would make a casino jealous. 8 high-definition cameras with night vision, motion sensors, and a cloud backup system that saved everything to remote servers. The cameras covered the entrance, the material storage area, the construction zone, and the perimeter. I even positioned one to capture the road leading into our site. If someone so much as sneezed near my materials, I'd have it on video. The system went live on a Thursday evening. I spent that night at home in Tempe, checking the camera feeds on my phone every hour like a paranoid security guard. Nothing happened. Friday was quiet too. By Saturday, I started wondering if maybe the thieves had moved on or gotten spooked. Sunday morning, my phone erupted with motion alerts at 4 a.m. I grabbed it from my nightstand, nearly dropping it in my haste. The camera feeds showed a large pickup truck, one of those heavy-duty F350s, backing up to our material storage area. My heart rate spiked as I watched 2 figures get out and start loading cedar planks into the truck bed. I was already pulling on jeans and shoes, phone pressed between my ear and shoulders. I called the police. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way, but by the time I'd given them the address and details, the truck on my camera feed was already pulling away, loaded with my materials. "Did you get the license plate?" the dispatcher asked. I rewound the footage, zooming in on the truck's rear plate. The camera quality was good enough to read it clearly. "Yeah, I got it. Arizona plate, number..." I read off the combination of letters and numbers. The police arrived at the job site before I did. 2 officers were walking the perimeter when I pulled up, and I immediately pulled out my phone to show them the footage. We stood there in the early morning light, watching the theft play out on my small screen. "That's pretty clear," the younger officer said, taking down notes. "We'll run the plate, see what comes up." "Can you tell where they went?" the other officer asked, an older guy with gray at his temples. I switched to the camera that faced the road. The truck had turned left out of the site, heading deeper into the development. They went that way, toward the finished section of the neighborhood. The officers exchanged a glance. We'll follow up on this, Mr. Porter. With footage this clear and a plate number, we should be able to track them down pretty quickly. I spent the rest of Sunday reviewing all the footage, documenting everything that was taken. The cedar decking, some of the travertine tile, several bundles of premium roofing shingles, and a collection of custom light fixtures I'd ordered from a specialty supplier. All told, roughly $12,000 worth of materials gone in one night. Monday morning, I got a call from Officer Martinez, the younger cop from yesterday. Mr. Porter, we traced that plate. Truck's registered to a Margaret Sullivan, lives at 2847 Saguaro Vista Drive. That's in Desert Ridge, I said, recognition hitting me. That's the HOA section right next to my job site. Correct. We're heading over there this morning to talk to her. Thought you'd want to know. I did want to know. I wanted to be there, actually, but I kept that to myself. Instead, I asked, will you let me know what happens? We'll be in touch, Martinez said before hanging up. The day dragged on forever. I tried to focus on work, on the other projects we had running, but my mind kept drifting back to Margaret Sullivan and her truck full of my materials. Who was she? Why was she stealing from a construction site? Was she selling the stuff, or did she have some other plan? Martinez called back late that afternoon. Mr. Porter, we talked to Ms. Sullivan. She denied everything, said her truck never left her property Sunday morning. But I have video footage of her truck at my site. She claims someone must have stolen her truck, used it, and returned it without her knowledge. I actually laughed out loud at that. Are you serious? That's her defense? Look, we know it sounds ridiculous, Martinez said, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. But without catching her actually in the truck, we need more evidence to make charges stick. The truck being there isn't enough if she claims it was stolen. So what do I do? Keep your cameras running. If it happens again, try to get clear footage of the driver's face. Right now, we have enough to get a warrant if we need one, but the DA wants a stronger case before moving forward. I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. $12,000 in materials, clear video of the theft, and the thief was just going to walk away? No, I couldn't accept that. That evening, I decided to do a little reconnaissance of my own. Not vigilante justice, just information gathering. I drove through the Desert Ridge HOA section, following the route that the truck had taken on camera. The neighborhood was exactly what you'd expect from an Arizona planned community. Stucco houses in varying shades of beige and tan, red tile roofs, desert landscaping with saguaro cacti and ornamental gravel. Everything was neat, orderly, governed by strict HOA rules that I'm sure came with substantial fines for violations. Saguaro Vista Drive curved through the northern section of the development. I slowed as I approached the 2800 block, looking for number 2847. The house was easy to spot, a large two-story with a circular driveway. And there, parked prominently in front of the three-car garage, was the F350 from my footage. I didn't stop, didn't want to make it obvious I was casing the place. Instead, I drove past slowly, noting the layout. The house sat on a corner lot with a high concrete wall surrounding the backyard. As I turned the corner, I noticed something interesting. The backyard wall had a gate, and through the bars I could see construction materials stacked neatly near what looked like a pool. My stomach twisted. Were those my materials? From my car, I couldn't tell for sure, but the timing was awfully suspicious. I circled the block, parking a few houses down where I had a partial view of Sullivan's property. Using my phone, I zoomed in and took several photos of the backyard, the materials, the truck. Just as I was about to leave, a woman emerged from the house. She was probably in her late 40s with blonde hair cut in that severe angled bob that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager." She was on her phone, gesturing animatedly as she walked toward her backyard gate. I took a few more photos, making sure to capture her face clearly. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Rick. "Boss, we got hit again." My blood ran cold. "When?" "Right now. I came back to the site to grab some tools I forgot, and there's a truck here loading up materials. Different truck this time, a white Silverado." "Call the police. I'm 15 minutes away." I was already starting my car, pulling away from Sullivan Street. Already did. They're on their way. I broke every speed limit getting back to the job site, but by the time I arrived, The truck was gone, and Rick was standing there with two different officers, neither of whom I recognized. "They got away?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. Rick nodded, looking furious. "Took off as soon as they heard my truck coming. I got close enough to see there were two of them, both women." "Women?" That surprised me. Yeah, one was driving. Couldn't see her well, but the other one was loading materials. Older lady, blonde hair. Margaret Sullivan. Had to be. Did the cameras catch it? "Oh yeah," Rick said with grim satisfaction. "Crystal clear footage of everything, including their faces." We pulled up the footage on my phone for the officers. And sure enough, there was Margaret Sullivan, bold as anything in broad daylight, loading my materials into a Silverado. The driver stayed in the truck, but when she turned to look over her shoulder, the camera caught her face too. Another woman, probably early 50s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "That's the same woman from the plate we ran," one of the officers said, pointing at Sullivan on the screen. "And we can see her face clearly this time. This is more than enough." "Can you arrest her now?" I asked. "We'll bring her in for questioning. With this footage and the previous incident, we definitely have probable cause." Finally, some progress. The officers took copies of the footage and headed out, presumably to Sullivan's house. Rick and I spent the next hour inventorying what had been taken this time. More roofing materials, some copper piping, electrical fixtures, and several bags of premium concrete mix. Another $5,000, give or take. "This is insane," Rick muttered as we worked. "What's she doing with all this stuff?" "I think she's building something," I said, remembering the construction materials I'd seen in her backyard. "I drove by her place earlier. She's got materials stacked up by her pool." "You think she's been using our stuff for her own project?" "That's exactly what I think." My phone rang again. Officer Martinez this time. "Mr. Porter, we're at the Sullivan residence. We've taken Margaret Sullivan into custody, and we've executed a search warrant for the property. You're going to want to see this." "I can come now?" "Please do. Bring your inventory records if you have them." I grabbed my laptop from the truck and told Rick to lock down the site. 20 minutes later, I was pulling up to Margaret Sullivan's house, which now looked like a crime scene, with two police cruisers parked out front and officers walking around the property. Martinez met me at the front door. "Come around back. You need to see this." I followed him through the side gate into the backyard, and my jaw literally dropped. There, next to an existing in-ground pool, was a partially constructed pool cabana. Not just any cabana, a high-end structure with a cedar frame, travertine tile flooring, and a roof covered in the same premium shingles I'd ordered for the Desert Ridge project. My materials. All of them, right there, being used to build Margaret Sullivan's personal pool house. "This is unbelievable," I said, walking closer to examine the structure. The cedar framing was my cedar, no question. The distinctive grain pattern and color matched exactly. The travertine tiles were the same Italian import I'd specifically chosen for my client's bathroom. Even the light fixtures mounted on the partially completed walls were the ones I'd ordered from that specialty supplier in California. "Can you identify these as your materials?" Martinez asked, notepad out. "Absolutely, every single piece." I opened my laptop and pulled up my order confirmations and receipts, comparing the specifications to what I was seeing. This cedar decking, I ordered it specifically for the Desert Ridge project. See the order number here? And these tiles, they're a custom color called Tuscan Sunrise. You can't buy these at Home Depot. This is several $1,000s worth of imported Italian tile. Another officer was taking photographs, documenting everything. I walked around the cabana, pointing out each element that had come from my job site. The more I looked, the angrier I got. This woman had stolen from my business, delayed my project, cost me money and time, all so she could build herself a fancy pool house without paying for it. "Where is she?" I asked Martinez. "In the back of the cruiser. We're taking her down to the station for processing." "What about the other woman, the one who was driving the Silverado?" "We're working on identifying her. Based on the address and some documents we found inside, we believe it's Linda Kowalski, the president of the Desert Ridge HOA. That stopped me cold. The HOA president? Why would she be involved in this? Martinez shrugged. "We're going to find out. Once we identify her for certain, we'll bring her in too." I spent the next hour at Sullivan's house, going through every piece of material in the cabana and the excess stored in her garage. It was like shopping in a store filled with my own inventory. Beyond the cedar, tile, and shingles, I found the custom windows, the copper piping, even the box of premium screws that had gone missing weeks ago. She'd taken everything, systematically stripping my job site like it was her personal supply warehouse. "Mr. Porter, we're going to need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement," Martinez said. "Bring all your documentation, receipts, orders, everything you have that proves these materials belong to you." "Absolutely. When do you need me?" "Tomorrow morning works, say 9 a.m. I agreed and headed home, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. I called my client on the way, explaining that there had been some delays due to theft, but that we'd recovered most of the materials and would be back on schedule soon. He was understanding, more concerned about the theft than the timeline. That evening, I went through all my records, printing out receipts, order confirmations, delivery schedules, everything I'd need to prove ownership of the materials. I also downloaded all the security footage, organizing it chronologically so I could show the pattern of theft. The more I documented, the clearer the picture became. This hadn't been opportunistic theft. Sullivan and her accomplice had been watching the site, waiting for deliveries, and then hitting us systematically, taking materials as they needed them for the Cabana project. The next morning, I arrived at the Scottsdale Police Department at 8:45, carrying a folder stuffed with documents and a USB drive with all the video footage. Martinez met me in the lobby and led me to an interview room where we spent the next 2 hours going through everything in detail. "This is one of the most well-documented theft cases I've seen," Martinez said, as I walked him through the footage, matching each theft to missing inventory and then to materials found at Sullivan's house. "Usually, people notice stuff missing but can't prove what was taken or when. You've got everything." "I run a business. Documentation is important. It's going to make prosecution a lot easier." "Speaking of which, what charges is Sullivan facing?" Martinez consulted his notes. "Theft, criminal trespassing, trafficking in stolen property. Based on the total value of materials stolen, we're looking at felony charges. If convicted, she could face several years in prison and hefty fines." "Good." I meant it. I'm not usually a vindictive person, but this woman had stolen from me, repeatedly, deliberately, and without any apparent remorse. We also brought in Linda Kowalski this morning," Martinez continued. "She's being charged as an accomplice. Turns out she and Sullivan are friends, and Kowalski was helping with the theft and construction. She's also facing felony charges." "Has either of them said why they did it?" Martinez actually smiled at that, but it wasn't a happy expression. "Sullivan claims she didn't know the materials were stolen. She says Kowalski told her she could get building materials at a discount through some HOA connection. And Kowalski isn't talking. She's lawyered up." I finished my statement, signed all the necessary paperwork, and left the police station feeling both satisfied and exhausted. The legal process was just beginning, but at least the thieves had been caught and the materials recovered. The next challenge was getting my materials back. The police had to hold them as evidence for now, but Martinez assured me they'd be released as soon as possible. In the meantime, I had to decide whether to order replacement materials to stay on schedule or wait for the evidence release. After consulting with my client, we decided to wait. The delay would be a few weeks at most, and reordering everything would be expensive and wasteful when we knew where the original materials were. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Porter, this is Patricia Hendricks. I'm the vice president of the Desert Ridge HOA." I immediately tensed. "What can I do for you?" "I'm calling about the recent incident involving our president, Linda Kowalski, and Margaret Sullivan. On behalf of the HOA board, I want to apologize for their actions. We had no idea this was happening." "Okay," I said cautiously, not sure where this was going. "We've held an emergency board meeting, and both Mrs. Kowalski and Mrs. Sullivan have been removed from their positions. We're conducting a full audit of HOA activities to make sure there haven't been any other inappropriate uses of their authority." "I appreciate you telling me, but I'm not sure what this has to do with me." "Well, we wanted you to know that the HOA as an organization had no part in this theft. These were the actions of two individuals, not the community as a whole. We're also offering to help in any way we can to make this right. I thought about that. The police have already recovered the materials. As long as I get them back and can complete my project, I'll be satisfied. Of course. And again, our sincere apologies. This is deeply embarrassing for our community. After she hung up, I couldn't help but wonder what else had been going on behind the scenes at that HOA. If the president was bold enough to help steal construction materials in broad daylight, what other questionable decisions had she been making? The answer came 2 weeks later, when Patricia Hendricks called again. Mr. Porter, I thought you'd want to know. Our audit turned up several irregularities in how Mrs. Kowalski was managing HOA funds. It appears she's been using community money for personal expenses. Like building a pool cabana for her friend? Potentially, yes. We've turned everything over to the police and our attorneys. This is turning into a much bigger mess than we initially thought. It turned out that Linda Kowalski had been using HOA funds to pay for various home improvements, not just for Sullivan, but for several board members. The pool cabana was just the most obvious example because she'd needed materials beyond what the HOA budget could cover, which is when she'd apparently decided that stealing from a nearby construction site was a reasonable solution. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly I was being contacted by reporters wanting to know about the theft ring run by HOA officials. I agreed to one interview, figuring the publicity wouldn't hurt my business, and the segment aired on a local evening news show. They used footage from my security cameras showing Sullivan and Kowalski loading materials into trucks, and then showed the partially built cabana in Sullivan's backyard. The reporter did a great job explaining how systematic the theft had been, and the piece ended with a reminder that the suspects were facing serious criminal charges. The community response was immediate and intense. I started getting calls from residents in Desert Ridge, apologizing for what had happened, some offering to help pay for any losses I'd incurred. I appreciated the sentiment, but I made it clear that I held Sullivan and Kowalski responsible, not the community. What I didn't expect was the call I got from a lawyer representing 3 other construction companies in the Scottsdale area. Mr. Porter, we've been experiencing similar thefts from our job sites over the past 6 months. After seeing your news interview, we're wondering if there might be a connection. I agreed to meet with them, bringing all my documentation and footage. The meeting included representatives from the other companies and their lawyer, and as we compared notes, a disturbing pattern emerged. All of the thefts had occurred in or near developments with active HOAs. All had involved selective theft of high-end materials, and in 2 cases, security footage showed what might be the same trucks I'd seen at my site. I think we're looking at an organized operation, the lawyer said. Your arrest of Sullivan and Kowalski might have broken up a larger theft ring. The information went to the police, who opened a broader investigation. Over the next month, it came out that Sullivan and Kowalski had indeed been part of a network of HOA members across several Scottsdale developments who were stealing materials and sharing or selling them amongst themselves. Some were using the materials for personal projects, others were selling them at deeply discounted prices to friends and family, and Kowalski had been facilitating the whole thing, using her authority as HOA president to provide cover and coordination. The case grew from 2 defendants to 7, all facing various charges related to theft, trafficking in stolen property, and conspiracy. The estimated total value of stolen materials across all the construction companies was over $200,000. What had started as me trying to catch whoever was stealing my cedar decking had snowballed into exposing a major criminal operation. The legal proceedings took months. I had to testify before a grand jury, provide evidence for multiple cases, and deal with the insurance companies who were now involved because of the scale of the theft. My security footage became Exhibit A in multiple trials, and I actually got thanked by the district attorney for having such comprehensive documentation. Margaret Sullivan's trial came first. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she'd been manipulated by Kowalski, that she truly believed the materials were being legally obtained. The jury didn't buy it. The security footage showed her actively participating in multiple thefts, trespassing on private property, and loading stolen goods. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 3 years in prison plus restitution. Linda Kowalski's trial was more complex because of her role as the ringleader and her embezzlement of HOA funds. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office was pushing for serious prison time given the scope of the crimes. In the end, Kowalski was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with orders to pay back over $75,000 to the various HOAs she'd stolen from, plus restitution to all the construction companies. The other 5 defendants received various sentences, ranging from probation to 18 months in prison, depending on their level of involvement and criminal history. All were ordered to pay restitution. For me, the financial recovery was slow but steady. My materials were released from evidence and returned to the job site. Some items had been damaged during the Cabana construction and couldn't be reused, but I was compensated through the restitution orders. The Desert Ridge. HOA also stepped up, voting to use community funds to cover some of my losses as a gesture of goodwill, even though they weren't legally liable. The Desert Ridge project was completed 4 months behind schedule, but my clients were understanding and actually appreciative of my persistence in catching the thieves. The story of the theft and recovery became a sort of legend in the Scottsdale construction community, and I found myself fielding questions about security measures at industry meetings and conferences. I upgraded security at all my job sites, not just cameras, but better fencing, locks, and even motion-sensitive lighting. Several other construction companies in the area did the same, and there was a noticeable drop in material theft incidents in the following months. The arrests and convictions had sent a clear message that this kind of crime would be taken seriously and prosecuted vigorously. The Desert Ridge HOA underwent a complete overhaul. Patricia Hendricks served as interim president while they established new oversight procedures, mandatory audits, and stricter controls on how board members could use their authority. They brought in a professional management company to handle the day-to-day operations, removing the temptation and opportunity for future board members to abuse their positions. About 8 months after the initial theft, I was back at the Desert Ridge site for the final inspection of the completed house. The clients were thrilled with the work, and as we walked through the beautiful home, I couldn't help but think about everything that had happened. What should have been a straightforward construction project had turned into a criminal investigation, multiple trials, and a complete restructuring of local HOA governance. As I was packing up my tools, Patricia Hendricks stopped by. "Mr. Porter, I wanted to thank you again for how you handled this situation. A lot of people would have just written off the loss and moved on." "I couldn't let it go," I said honestly. "It wasn't just about the money, it was the principle. Someone was stealing from my business, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it." "Well, your persistence exposed a much bigger problem. We've completely changed how our HOA operates, and I know other communities in the area have done the same. You made a real difference." "I just wanted my cedar decking back," I said with a slight smile, "and you got it, plus you took down a theft ring. Not bad for a day's work." After she left, I took one last look at the completed house. It was beautiful, exactly what the clients had wanted. The cedar decking on the back porch gleamed in the Arizona sun, the travertine tile sparkled in the master bathroom, and the custom windows framed perfect views of the Sonoran Desert. These were the materials that had been stolen, recovered, and finally put to their intended use. I thought about Margaret Sullivan's pool cabana, which had been demolished as part of her restitution agreement. All those stolen materials, all that effort, and she'd ended up with nothing but a criminal record and a prison sentence. Meanwhile, I'd completed my project, been compensated for my losses, and gained a reputation as someone who wouldn't be pushed around. The experience changed how I approached business. I became more cautious, more security conscious, but also more aware of the community dynamics around my job sites. I started introducing myself to HOA boards before starting projects in their neighborhoods, establishing relationships and making it clear that I was a professional running a legitimate business. Most were welcoming and appreciative, eager to distance themselves from the stigma of the Sullivan-Kowalski scandal. I also became something of an advocate for construction site security in the local business community. I gave talks at Chamber of Commerce meetings about the importance of documentation, the value of good security systems, and how to work with law enforcement effectively when theft occurs. My story became a case study in how to handle property crime in the construction industry. Rick, my foreman, never let me forget that he was the one who'd initially spotted the thefts and made that crucial call when he caught them in the act the second time. He was right, of course. Without his vigilance and quick thinking, we might never have caught them. I made sure he got a substantial bonus once all the restitution money came through. The clients from the Desert Ridge project referred me to several of their friends, and I ended up building 3 more houses in the Scottsdale area over the next year. Each time I made sure to have comprehensive security in place, but I never had another theft incident. Word had gotten around about what happened to the last people who tried to steal from Travis Porter's job sites. About a year after the trial, I drove past Margaret Sullivan's house out of curiosity. The pool cabana was gone, of course, demolished and removed. The backyard looked strangely empty without it, just the pool and some basic landscaping. The house itself had a for sale sign in the front yard. I later heard that Sullivan's family had moved away after she went to prison, unable to cope with the shame and notoriety. Linda Kowalski's house, in a different part of Desert Ridge, also went up for sale. The HOA she'd once presided over had to deal with the aftermath of her crimes, implementing reforms and rebuilding trust with the residents. I heard through Patricia that it took years for the community to fully recover from the scandal, but they eventually did, emerging stronger with better governance and oversight. As for me, business continued to grow. The publicity from the case, while not something I'd sought, had established me as a contractor who ran a tight ship and didn't tolerate theft or fraud. Clients appreciated that, and I found myself getting more high-end projects, working with people who valued integrity and accountability. The security footage that had started everything, those grainy nighttime videos of trucks loading up my materials, had been played in courtrooms, featured on news broadcasts, and shown at industry conferences. Those recordings had been the key to everything, the irrefutable evidence that led to arrests, convictions, and ultimately justice. I sometimes wondered what would have happened if I hadn't installed those cameras. Sullivan and Kowalski would probably still be out there, stealing materials and building their pool cabanas with other people's property. Other contractors would have continued losing materials, writing off the losses, and never knowing where their expensive cedar and travertine had gone. The theft ring would have grown, emboldened by success, potentially costing the construction industry hundreds of thousands more dollars. Instead, one contractor's decision to document his job site had brought down an entire criminal operation. It felt surreal sometimes, thinking about how it had all unfolded from that first missing box of screws to federal charges and prison sentences. The story became a reminder in the construction community that we're not helpless against thieves and criminals. With the right tools, documentation, and persistence, justice can be served. It also highlighted the importance of community oversight, of making sure that organizations like HOAs have proper checks and balances to prevent abuse of power. Years later, I still get asked about the case. Young contractors starting out want to know what security systems I recommend, how I organized my documentation, what I would have done differently. I'm always happy to share the lessons I learned, hoping that my experience can help others avoid or resolve similar situations. The Desert Ridge house stands as a monument to that whole crazy period. Every time I drive past it, I remember the months of theft, investigation, trials, and ultimate resolution. The house itself is beautiful, a testament to quality construction and perseverance. The materials that were stolen, recovered, and finally installed tell a story that few people looking at the house would ever guess. In the end, Margaret Sullivan built her pool cabana, just not the way she intended. Instead of a luxury addition to her backyard, she built herself a prison cell. Linda Kowalski's attempt to help her friend and line her own pockets ended with her losing everything: her freedom, her reputation, her position in the community. The other members of their theft ring learned the hard way that stealing construction materials isn't a victimless crime, and that eventually, security footage and determined contractors will bring justice. As for Travis Porter Construction, we're still building quality homes across the Scottsdale area, now with the best security systems in the business and a reputation for never backing down when someone tries to take advantage of us. My crew knows the story well. They joke about checking the security feeds before they leave each night, making sure no HOA presidents are lurking around with pickup trucks. The experience taught me that running a business isn't just about building houses or managing crews. It's about standing up for yourself, documenting everything, and refusing to be a victim. It's about working with law enforcement, being patient with the legal process, and trusting that justice will eventually prevail. And sometimes it's about installing 8 high-definition security cameras and catching thieves red-handed, even when they're supposed to be upstanding community leaders. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything about how I handled the situation. The months of stress, the time spent documenting evidence, the court appearances, all of it was worth it to see justice served and to help prevent future thefts from other contractors. The construction industry in Scottsdale became more secure because of what happened, and that's something I can take pride in beyond any single building project. The irony wasn't lost on me that an HOA, an organization supposedly dedicated to maintaining community standards and property values, had been the source of such criminal activity. But that irony led to meaningful reform, to better governance and oversight, to communities that are now more accountable and transparent. Sometimes you need a scandal to force positive change, and the Sullivan-Kowalski case certainly qualified as a scandal. I occasionally wonder what Margaret Sullivan thinks about now, sitting in prison with years left on her sentence, contemplating the pool cabana that cost her everything. Does she regret her choices? Does she understand the magnitude of what she did, not just the theft, but the betrayal of trust, the damage to her community, the harm to legitimate businesses? I'll probably never know. What I do know is that she learned an expensive lesson about property rights, criminal law, and the persistence of one contractor who refused to let theft slide. The final chapter of the story came almost 2 years after the initial theft, when I received a check for the last of the restitution payments. Sullivan and the other defendants had been making monthly payments from prison jobs and seized assets, slowly but steadily paying back what they had stolen. That final check closed the book on the financial aspect of the case, though the impact continued to ripple through the construction community and HOA governance practices. I framed one of the security camera screenshots, the one showing Sullivan loading cedar planks into the F-350, and hung it in my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder to stay vigilant, to document everything, to never assume that theft is just the cost of doing business. That grainy image of a thief in action represents everything that's wrong with cutting corners and everything that's right about holding people accountable. The Desert Ridge community eventually healed from the scandal. New leadership, new procedures, and time helped residents move past the embarrassment and rebuild trust in their HOA. I continued to work in the area, building relationships with the new board members and demonstrating that not all outsiders were there to be taken advantage of, just as not all HOA members were criminals. My business thrived on the reputation built during those months of investigation and trial. Clients knew that I was someone who paid attention to details, who protected my investments, and who would see things through to the end no matter how difficult. Those qualities that helped me catch the thieves also made me a better contractor, more meticulous, more professional, more reliable. Rick eventually started his own construction company, using lessons learned from our experience with the theft ring. We remained friends and occasionally collaborated on larger projects. He installed even more elaborate security systems than I had, joking that he wasn't going to let any HOA presidents get the better of him. The story of the stolen materials and the pool cabana became a legend in Arizona construction circles, told and retold at industry gatherings, used as a teaching example in business classes, cited in articles about property crime prevention. I gave up trying to count how many times people referenced that guy who caught the HOA theft ring with security cameras. That guy was me, and while I never sought the attention, I accepted it as part of the story. In quiet moments, I still shake my head at the audacity of it all. 2 women, trusted community leaders, systematically stealing from multiple job sites to build luxury home improvements they didn't want to pay for. The entitlement, the complete disregard for other people's property and livelihoods still amazes me. But I'm grateful that their actions led to positive changes, to better security practices, to reformed HOA governance, and ultimately to justice. The construction industry faces many challenges, from material costs to labor shortages to weather delays. Theft shouldn't have to be one of them, but it is. My hope is that by sharing my story, by demonstrating how technology and persistence can combat property crime, other contractors will be inspired to protect their job sites and stand up when they're victimized. As I sit here in my office, looking at that framed security camera image, I think about all the contractors who've lost materials and never caught the thieves. I think about all the HOA boards operating without proper oversight. I think about all the Margaret Sullivans out there who think they can get away with theft because construction sites are easy targets. And I hope that my story, the story of how security footage exposed a theft ring and brought down corrupt HOA leaders, will deter at least some of them from trying. The materials stolen from my job site eventually ended up where they belonged, installed in a beautiful home that stands as testament to quality work and ethical business practices. The thieves ended up where they belonged, in prison paying for their crimes. And I ended up with a story that I'll be telling for the rest of my career, a story about perseverance, justice, and the importance of good security cameras. Some people say I got lucky, that if Sullivan and Kowalski hadn't been so bold, so systematic in their thefts, they might never have been caught. Maybe that's true. But I prefer to think that I created my own luck by being prepared, by documenting everything, by installing those cameras and reviewing the footage, by working with law enforcement and seeing the case through to conviction. Luck favors the prepared, and I was prepared. The legacy of that summer when my materials were stolen extends far beyond my personal business. Construction sites across Scottsdale, across Arizona, probably across the country, are more secure because of what happened. HOAs have better governance because of the scandal. The justice system demonstrated that it takes property crime seriously, and one contractor proved that fighting back against theft, even when it seems like a losing battle, can lead to justice and positive change. I never did build a pool cabana, but I built something better, a reputation for integrity and a business that thrives on ethical practices and thorough documentation. The irony is that Margaret Sullivan's attempt to build her pool house on the cheap ended up building my business instead. Her criminal choices led directly to my professional success, and there's a certain poetic justice in that. As I close this chapter of my life and move forward with new projects and new challenges, I carry the lessons learned from that experience. Trust but verify. Document everything. Install security cameras. Work with law enforcement. Be persistent. Stand up for yourself. These lessons serve me well in business and in life, reminding me that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, leads to the best outcomes. The story of the HOA that built a pool cabana with materials stolen from my job site will follow me for the rest of my career. And I'm okay with that. It's a good story. A story about justice prevailing and criminals being held accountable. It's a story that started with missing cedar decking and ended with prison sentences and industry reform. And most importantly, it's a true story, proven by hours of security footage showing exactly what happened and who was responsible. That footage, those cameras, that decision to document everything, made all the difference. And that's the real moral of this story, the importance of being prepared, staying vigilant, and never giving up when you know you're in the right.